Watching Gravitas, a big showdown is brewing between the Trump administration and internet users in the United States. A plan has been hatched to deregulate internet service providers in the country, essentially removing all the net neutrality requirements that companies now need to fulfill. But netizens around America, indeed around the world, are trying to mount pressure to scrap these plans. Here's a report.
Net neutrality is under threat yet again in the United States. The country's telecom regulator, the Federal Communications Commission, wants to scrap the Obama-era fair internet rules. At the middle of the row is FCC's Commissioner Ajit Pai. He wants to scrap existing net neutrality laws. Pai feels the changes will not hamper the internet usage experience in any way.
Some of these telcos could hold streaming services like Netflix hostage by demanding more money from them. Do you worry about that?
Well, I think the key word in your question is could. This is all entirely hypothetical. We have never seen that in the 20 years or so that the commercial internet has existed. And going forward, we require transparency, as I said, to make sure that any practice like that would be disclosed. And we empower the Federal Trade Commission to take action against any company, big or small, that's behaving in an anti-competitive way or otherwise harming consumers.
Ajit Pai's move has caused outrage across America. Netizens are up in arms against the FCC. They are raising their voice through protests. Several citizens have also written to the FCC and their lawmakers demanding a rollback of the new proposals. Experts say Ajit Pai's defense is based on a flawed argument.
The argument that Commissioner Pai has made is, well, what happened in the prior 20 years when we didn't have these regulations in place? And I think that the answer to that question is, well, in the prior 20 years, we didn't have nearly as much commerce. We didn't have the video streaming that we do today. And that because of that, we really don't have the history that he's pointing to support the idea that deregulation is a good thing.
Activists say that they are ready to mount a legal challenge if the FCC votes to scrap net neutrality. But the FCC chief doesn't seem concerned by the protest for now. Bureau Report, WION.
Let's go straight to our guests. With us from California, Jeff Cow, data scientist and Bigelow refugee seeking, opportunities in data. That's what his CV says. From Michigan, U.S., we have Florian Schaub, assistant professor at the University of Michigan School of Information. And from New Delhi, Rajan Matthew, Director General of the COAI. Thank you all for joining us and good evening to all of you. Jeff, let's begin with you. For the layperson, what is happening today? What is this vote and how will it change our lives if they vote in favor of the motion?
Sure, yeah. So the vote's actually happening in about 30 minutes, 11:30 on the East Coast. And I think, I can only speak for myself, but I think it is a little concerning as to what the loosening of the regulation, how it could allow those here in the United States to have more freedom to, block throttle traffic. So it's from a personal perspective, it's a little concerning. And, anytime you have that sort of uncertainty, I think, there's definitely a lot of worry about what they could do.
Okay. Florian, do you want to put it in perspective for our viewers? Why is this vote important and why have the efforts of netizens not paid off, or are they going to pay off? How do you see this going?
Yeah, so the reason this is important is that net neutrality is really the basis to enable innovation and competition as well as openness in the internet, right? Without net neutrality, basically internet service providers can charge their consumers on one hand, but they cannot, or their customers, but they can also charge companies like Netflix and other companies to make sure that traffic actually gets to the consumers. In other areas, that's called racketeering. Right. So the reason why this vote is important is if this goes through, we might see large changes in how the internet economy works. And Ajit Pai says, well, these are hypotheticals, and yes, they are hypotheticals. But the reason we have the current net neutrality rules, which are just 2 years old, is to protect against these hypotheticals.
Raj and Matthew, how is what's happening in the US going to impact the life of an Indian, say someone like me who uses the internet? Why should it matter to me?
Well, it matters to us because the TRAI has adopted and recommended to the licensor, which is the DOT, the existing net neutrality definitions as it stands, which is what Mr. Pai is looking to overturn. So, of course, from the operator perspective, we had really supported more or less Mr. Pai's position that the internet should really be free. Yes, we support that, but there's no necessity to start putting in what we call ex-ante type of prohibitions. And Mr. Pai said, listen, especially in the US and also in India, there are ample regulations and rules already in place. Mr. Pai pointed out that if you look at the Sherman Antitrust Act, these issues of throttling and no prioritization are already embedded in these regulations. And so therefore, if there is a violation of this, they can be prosecuted under those existing rules. And that's the same position that we indicated here in India, that yes, there's really no need to put all of these ex-ante regulations in place. There are plenty of consumer protection laws, anti-competitive laws, all of those in place, and those should be used to ensure that the neutrality and, if you will, the freedom of the internet is preserved. In India, we have the added responsibility of connecting the next 1 billion unconnected. We need innovative means and not these straitjackets to be able to do that connectivity.
Jeff, some reports say that 18 attorneys generals have called on the FCC, the regulator, to cancel this repeal vote over millions of fake comments. What have you heard?
Yeah, that's what I've seen as well. And there's been a lot of research out there, including my own, that found a lot of fake comments in the FCC public record. So these comments are sort of meant to reflect public opinion. And for some reason, there's been a lot of essentially, bot submitted comments, particularly suspicious from sort of the industry side. And, I think it's really important to dig deeper into them. In the U.S., there's been a lot of concern lately about sort of how the public conversation can be hijacked, by organizations with, whether state actors or companies, organizations with a lot of means. And, right now it's a very touchy subject. My research has exposed at least 1.3 million of these sort of manufactured comments. The Attorney General of New York has indicated that he's found 2 million where individuals have had their identity stolen in order to submit these comments. Because, at the end of the day, when you submit a comment, putting your identity out there into the public record, and
Sure.
For example, dead people's emails and addresses being used to submit these pro-industry comments. So there's a lot of very concerning implications for the public conversation in the U.S. Because of.
Florian, I'm quoting from one of the things that I read today. Net neutrality is a secret sauce that has made the internet awesome. Is there enough awareness about the secret sauce existing? And do people know how a repeal of this could kill the internet as we know it today?
Yeah, I don't think there's sufficient awareness of the potential implications of this. So the way net neutrality is portrayed, especially by the FCC at the moment, is kind of as this bad thing that's preventing innovation and prevents us from prevents the ISPs from investing into infrastructure, and that's not really the case, right? Like, because we had net neutrality for a long time, or at least for the longest time, ISPs were not really interested in prioritizing different types of traffics. They kind of understood themselves as similar to utility companies. The net neutrality rules kind of enforce that on them. They kind of have to behave neutral, similar to how your power provider can't make your electric car charge less unless Tesla pays you more, right? So Raj spoke about kind of regulation creating straitjackets for this integration. I think that's not really the issue. The issue is more that we're basically preventing from the ISPs creating straitjackets for consumers because they hold a lot of power. And this powerful role could mean that they can basically regulate what you get to see. right? On your computer, on your phone, they can say, oh, you want video streaming? That's $5 more a month. That's $10 more. Actually, we don't support any free speech content on our network. And that's a big problem. And you can say, well, let's let the market sort that out, right? They need to be transparent about that. The problem in the US is that in most areas, particularly in rural areas, you don't have a choice who your ISP is, who your internet service provider is. You have maybe one company, only one company in your area. If you have two companies, you're already lucky. Yes, there are some cities, larger cities and urban areas where you might have 3, 4 different providers. But if they all react in the same way, which is anti-consumer, then to this change in the rules, then you basically don't have a choice. And you don't have any real level of recourse because it's going to be transparent, right? And the FTC can only go, they can just tell you, oh, we're going to be throttling this, or we're not going to show you this type of content. And that does not violate the FTC Act.
Right. I'll have to leave it at that. Jeff Cow, Florian and Rajan Matthew, thank you very much for joining us. The vote hasn't begun just yet, but let's tell you what will be the impact of the repeal of net neutrality. Some netizens have come up with their own estimates. The cost of an internet plan could rise substantially. If Ajit Pai's plans go through, users will be subjected to pay extra for high-speed access to their favorite websites or apps, and this could run into hundreds of dollars every month. And this will be like how you would pay for your television plan. There will be a basic cost. And then on top of that, you will have to pay extra for your favorite sports or news channel or that favorite movie that you may want to watch. And if it's in high definition, you pay extra yet again. The internet will not be treated as a utility, and the end user could end up bearing additional cost to access social media websites, video streaming services, or even a simple Google search. That's how it's going to change your life. What is net neutrality? If it is indeed a complex subject and we're breaking it down here, the concept is quite simple actually. All data exchange in any form, whether it is text, images or video, must get equal treatment on the internet. That is the basic principle. This essentially means that the internet service provider cannot at the moment discriminate or give preferential treatment to any content provider. In other words, they cannot speed up or slow down your internet speed when you open anything on the internet. Changes to this principle are essentially going to affect every internet user in the United States to begin with. If American internet service providers get the FCC's nod, which they probably will after this vote, they will get power to decide who fails or succeeds on the internet. And this can play out in different ways. Service providers could charge you additionally to access specific websites or services, or they could even charge the companies to ensure steady and high-speed access to their content. And this would mean that the users will be charged more money by the telecom operators in one way or the other. Essentially, the burden passes on to the consumer. And new companies, especially startups, will not get a level playing field. Why is the US government pushing for a change to net neutrality rules? The current Trump administration is seen as pro-deregulation and deregularization. And especially Ajit Pai, the man at the helm, he's the current chief of the FCC. He had voted against the 2015 Open Internet Order. Before initiating the process to scrap net neutrality in the United States, he closed an investigation into zero rating practices against 3 service providers. Zero rating is a practice by internet service providers which allows users to access certain apps without spending their monthly data limits. What about net neutrality in India? India so far has taken a principled approach on this matter. Telecom regulator TRAI took a pro-net neutrality stand when Facebook and Airtel tried to introduce zero-rated services and plans by banning their rollout. But telecom operators, during many consultations, have often pitched for anti-net neutrality practices, seeking a more liberal approach.